Resuming debate, the honourable member for South Shore St. Margaret's, using her right of reply.
And first of all, I would like to thank my honourable colleagues for their thoughtful points raised and for bringing perspectives on this issue from different regions of the country. Vessel abandonment is a serious and persistent problem in coastal communities all across Canada. Back in June, I made the case during the first hour of debate for taking action on abandoned and derelict vessels, how these vessels can affect Canadians' livelihood, opportunities for tourism, safety, environmental quality, and navigation, and how there aren't many legislative, regulatory, or even practical ways that small coastal communities, or for that matter, large coastal communities, can deal with them. The Port of Shelburne, in my riding, is a perfect example, where they have done everything legally possible to have the Farley Mowat, an abandoned vessel, removed, but they still have it taking up 1/4 of their wharf space. I hope that this conversation and subsequent actions by the government will address this shortfall, Mr. Speaker, and that parliamentarians in 2, 5, or 20 years won't still be having this same conversation. People in coastal communities have waited long enough for action. Because this is not a new issue, I have heard about this problem my whole life, growing up in Nova Scotia, working in different communities on the South Shore, raising kids in Bridgewater, during my time campaigning, and of course now as a Member of Parliament for South Shore St. Margaret's. I am thrilled that I've had the ability to raise the profile of this issue and hopefully have a positive response from the House of Commons on M40. If supported by my colleagues in the House, I have confidence that the government, led in this case by the Honourable Minister of Transportation, will take many of the steps suggested in M40 to prevent vessel abandonment in the future and to find ways to support communities dealing with the burden of an abandoned vessel. I'm sure many of us in this House and many at home would love to see this problem go away once this vote happens. Unfortunately, there isn't any quick solutions. There is no silver bullet. If the federal government spent hundreds of millions of dollars immediately removing the over 600 abandoned and derelict vessels from Canadians' ports, beaches and shores, this would send a signal of irresponsible vessel owners that abandonment is the most cost-effective way of disposal option. We can't do that. We cannot give irresponsible vessel owners a get-out-of-jail-free card simply by making the taxpayers responsible for cleaning up someone else's mess. What I have proposed is that the government develop a comprehensive, long-term plan that will first and foremost try to prevent vessels from being abandoned in the future. We need solutions that give the government and law enforcement more tools in their tool belts to take action on vessel owners who are not being responsible, expanding the scope of the large vessel registry to improve owner identification, ratifying the International Marine Organization's Convention on the Removal of Wrecks, and making abandonment of a vessel an offence are all steps that can help prevent abandonment from happening and encourage responsible vessel ownership. And we know that most Canadian vessel owners are already being safe and responsible. We know that a very small fraction of owners have not been responsible for a variety of reasons, and that this has caused an immense burden and headache on communities across Canada. And we need some way to address this as well. The only way the federal government can get involved is when a vessel is creating an immediate environmental hazard or is blocking a navigable waterway. Failing these, the onus dealing with the abandoned vessel falls on the unlucky province, community, port, landowner where the vessel was abandoned. And they bear the burden through the inability to sell land, expenses related to monitoring and inspecting of the vessel or the site, lost revenue from docking fees, lost revenue and the effect on tourism, and as well as public outcry. In cases where other avenues have been exhausted, where the presence of an abandoned vessel is creating an economic burden on community, M40 asks that the government identify options to assist in its removal, and this is an important last resort option. Our coastlines are a source of pride and economic opportunity, and our policies should safeguard them and the livelihoods of those who depend on them. Derelict and abandoned vessels are an economic burden and limit the potential of our waterways and our harbours. To that end, Mr. Speaker, I ask my colleagues of this House to please support M40. Thank you.